Hey friends, welcome to a special video series that I'm making about food addictions, emotional eating, and self-love. Now this is a video series, it's got 3 videos. I want you to watch them all. The link is in the description below to the other 2 videos. This is part 1. And over the last little while, I've had a lot of people talking about their issues with food. And whether it be binge eating, emotional eating, food addictions, and self-love, there's a lot of different topics around this, and I have encountered all of it, and I wanted to share what I've experienced with you guys, and hopefully somewhere along the line there's maybe something that can help anybody out there, and that's why I'm doing this series. So the first video, we're going to talk about food addictions. And a lot of people don't believe that food is an addiction because it's socially acceptable to eat. We eat food, we socially eat food, we need it to survive, so people don't think that it could be an addiction like alcohol or drugs or gambling or anything like that. They don't see it as that, they justify it by the fact that they just need to eat. But food addiction is real. Tell anybody to stop eating their favorite food and they're probably not going to have a good time with it. Specifically, cheese is the one that I always get. I could never live without cheese. I could never live without my steaks. I get potatoes, I get grains. But you know what I never really hear? I can never ever live without tomatoes. People don't say that. They say they can't live without cupcakes. They say they can't live without cookies or chocolate. Things like that. So it really makes me think, if these foods are so like part of your life and you have to have them, then maybe it is a food addiction and we need to admit that it is so that we can start to heal and move forward from that. We're in denial that food can be an addiction, and I know I was in denial that food was an addiction. It got to the point where I was hiding food in the house and I'd snack on it when no one was home. It got really bad and I don't want to admit it, but it happened to me. So that's how I gained all my weight, and that's why I was so unhealthy. That's why my joints hurt every morning. I would wake up in the morning and sometimes it would hurt my feet to get out of bed because it was too much to put my body weight on. And this isn't healthy. And so we need to do something about it. We have a lot of triggers in our lives that cause us to have these addictions. Much like somebody who smokes cigarettes always in their truck, as soon as they get in, they light one. When they quit smoking, every time they get into the truck, they feel like they need to light a cigarette. It's conditioned response, and that's what happens with food as well. For an example, most of you guys know that I used to be addicted to energy drinks. I would drink 1 to 2, and on the rare occasion, I would have 3 in a day. I know, bad. So, but every time I would get gas, or when I was addicted, I would walk down to the local gas station that's only a block or 2 away, and I would buy my energy drinks there all the time, and that's where I bought them, and sometimes at the grocery store, but I always got them at that gas station. After I gave up and went raw, I found myself randomly in that gas station filling up my car with gas. And I realized that it is definitely a trigger to be in a store or situation where you would normally buy these foods. And I felt a strong urge to go over to the cooler and get my favorite drinks. And then I had to really think, wow, I haven't done this in forever. And now all of a sudden I have this feeling that I need to go to the cooler. So we need to be aware of that. Another thing can be an example of movie nights. And when you have a movie night, you get your popcorn, maybe you have your favorite meal, maybe you order pizza. And this is a familiar thing that happens over and over and over and over again that conditions you to have these foods. And it creates an addiction. It creates want to have a movie night so that you can have your addiction. It creates, or if you always have chocolate, and that comes into the whole tradition and culture thing. Because we have these holidays like Easter, you get the chocolate. So it becomes a conditioned response and we just naturally do it because that's how it's always been. We have to change that. There's the addiction of euphoria that only lasts 10 minutes. So you get for me it was Chinese food. That was my bad addiction. I would just go to the mall because my favorite place was at the mall, and I would always grab some Chinese food, and the euphoria only lasts 10 minutes. You want it so bad, and then you go and get it, and then after you get everything, the onslaught of I shouldn't have done that, I wasted money, I don't feel good, my gut hurts, now my mouth is dry because it was so salty, blah, 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 blah. Guilt, regret, all of that happens, and then you feel like you hate yourself. I mean, it depends. Everyone's different. They're going to have different ranges, but I felt like I hated myself. I didn't want to, you know, go on the rest of the day, and then you say, screw it, I'm just going to eat whatever I want now because I ruined the day. And it just creates this snowball effect of more addiction. And then we comfort ourselves with more food that we shouldn't. Like, oh, I had a bad day and I ate Chinese food and I feel bad that I did, so I'm gonna have chips with TV tonight because that'll make me feel better. And it's just a vicious circle. We have to just start to realize that it is an addiction. And when we stop eating it, that is where we see where there's an addiction. We just have to start. There's a difference between instant gratification and long-term gratification. Where I am now in my life, I am at the body weight that I love. My health is amazing. I've never experienced this level of health before. And when I look back on all those times that I would get Chinese food to make myself feel better, none of that ever compares to the health and self-love that I feel now. So it's not worth it for that 10 minutes of euphoria. You have to start, instead of looking at the next 5 minutes, you have to look at the next year. You really do. You have to look at, how am I going to feel in a month? How am I going to feel in 2 months? How am I going to feel next year if I eat this one thing? Then that can help. It did help me in the beginning, so there's another little piece of help that hopefully can help someone. When you think about the long-term gratifications and where you will be, when you're eating clean, you don't actually have anything to beat yourself up over. You don't have anything to hate yourself over. You don't have all this guilt and regret that comes from eating things you know you shouldn't. And you're free. You become free from that self-loathing that you can fall into. Another thing I wanted to point out is that cheat days are another justification to eat our addictions. We tend to put these foods on pedestals, like, for example, pizza. If Friday night is your cheat day and you wait all week until Friday night so that you can have your pizza, you're putting it on a pedestal. And Dr. Garth Davis says this in his book, Proteinaholic, which I highly recommend. Again, I don't eat cooked food, but it's for the information and his insight into our protein addiction. But he does say that cheat days are like putting these bad foods on pedestals, and we look to them like they're this big reward, but they are not. The reward is being healthy, and you should never reward yourself with something that's going to hurt yourself. And I'll talk about that in the third video of self-love. An AA member is never going to say, on Friday nights, I'm going to have a drink. They don't. They can't. It's not something that they can have, or something that they should have or want to have, because it will make them fall back into their addiction. And we have to change our mindset when it comes to foods that you know you need to get out of your life. For me, it was cooked food and animal products. For you, it could just be animal products or chips or whatever. It doesn't matter what it is. It matters that we are addicted to certain things and we have to start to let them go. Recovery means getting rid of it. It should not be in your life, and it shouldn't be a cheat meal. It shouldn't be anything. It needs to get out of your life so you can recover and be finally free from that. So some solutions that I have. First, you have to admit that food is an addiction. You have to admit that You know, those people who say, I can't live without cheese, well, you have to admit that cheese is an addiction. And actually, there are casomorphins in cheese, as a side note, that addicts the baby cow to the mama so it doesn't run away. Guess what it does to us? Same thing. So yes, cheese is definitely an addiction, but the other foods are as well. Chips, carbs that are linked with fat, like muffins and bagels, and then there's bread and there's cookies, and you name it. People are addicted to these foods because they are not foods for us. You don't hear people saying, I'm addicted to romaine lettuce, like if it left their life, they would die. If romaine lettuce was never around again, I'd survive. I would just eat something else. And so, you know, if cheese goes away, some people freak out. That's how you know that it's an addiction. So the second thing, you need to remove these foods from your life. You basically have to stop buying them. You have to stop eating them. You have to use your mind and link bad stuff with those foods if you want to. Just like, for example, cheese. I've linked torture and animal abuse to cheese. It also looks like plastic to me. So I will also put in the description a link to my mind tricks video. You can use some of those if you want, and you can make up your own. Anything you can to let yourself remember that these foods are not good for you. Whatever it is, again, it can be anything. It depends on where you are in your journey and what you need to let go of. Don't put yourself in situations that are going to trigger that. And if you do need to be in those situations, be prepared. For example, I don't go to that gas station anymore because when I go in there, it's a mental trigger to get those energy drinks. So I just gas up at a different one. So again, if you are going to a family gathering where you always have a certain cookie or whatever, it can be anything, make sure that you're prepared before you go. Remember and think about what could be triggering you there and try to be mentally focused when you're there. Make sure you eat before you go. Make sure you bring something if you have to. These kinds of little tricks will help ease into those situations to help retrain your brain to think of other things instead of your triggers. So for example, if you're doing like movie night and that's a trigger that makes you want to order pizza, start replacing that with another thing that you can link with movie nights, like your favorite raw food dish. I make my little raw vegan mushroom mini pizzas when we have a movie night, and I've linked that with it. Another thing is that when we are in situations like that, for example, movie night, maybe you want popcorn, and it's actually the act of eating that you want. It's not the food itself sometimes. So just chop up veggies and eat those while you're watching a movie, and gradually replace those connections with food with other things or other foods that you know are good for you. Make sure you eat enough. That's a huge one, because if you are not sustained in your body for energy, or you're not hitting your calorie and nutrition goals, you're going to start craving, and you're going to crave those things that you're addicted to, obviously. Because if you eat enough food, you're going to get enough nutrition, and you're really going to realize that those food addictions are actually all mental. I realized this early on in my journey because I was using Chronometer and entering all my food, and I noticed that I was hitting pretty much all of my nutrition goals. So why was I craving Chinese food? There's nothing in Chinese food that my body needs. If I am fully, full of nutrition, I don't need anything in the Chinese food. It's not the Chinese food that is going to satisfy me. It's the mental connection to it. It's the flavors and the taste. But again, you need to release that. It isn't food. It's not food for me anymore. So, and it's great to be free. And I really want to see people free from that kind of stuff. Make sure that the last thing that you can do to help with this is to make sure that you're eating low fat. And I know people are going to say things about that we need fat and that we crave fat. Actually, we crave fat when we eat fat. The more fat I eat, the more fat I crave. And it can be a vicious cycle downward. Fat makes me tired and lazy and makes me crave more random stuff. So I just get what my body needs for my omega-3s, 6s, whatever else it needs, and I eat that with my greens to absorb the fat-soluble vitamins, and that's all I need. The more fat I eat, the more I crave, and the more those addictions kind of creep up. So I gotta keep the fat low. Again, for the millionth time, I'm not anti-fat, I'm anti-too much fat. We just eat too much of it, and for the past 10 years that I've been trying to be a raw vegan, I would always do a high-fat version. I was always including lots of oils and avocados and coconuts. And yeah, those, I mean, not the oils, but the avocados and coconut and olives are whole food. But they're super high fat, so they were not sustainable because after a couple weeks, my blood sugar levels would be crashing all the time after fruit, and I could never figure out why until I went low fat raw. So again, experiment with your fat levels. Some people might need a little extra, but just keep it low on the low end, and that should help with that. I just find that high fat diets are completely unsustainable, plus you need to cut your calories if you need to lose weight, which doesn't work in the long term either. That's just what I've noticed with my journey, that for 10 years I just could never stick to more than a couple weeks raw, and then I was basically craving everything under the sun because I couldn't do it. I had to be low fat. So I hope you guys like this video. Part 2 is coming out soon, so just check the link below. I have a link to it in the description. If you like this video and you like the series, please click like and subscribe to my channel for more vlogs from me. And you can find me on Facebook, Twitter, Pinterest, Instagram, and YouFood, all at Raw Food Romance. I also have an ebook for sale. The link is also in the description. It's called 52 to a New You, which helps you transition over to a raw vegan diet. So I hope you guys like this, and stay tuned for part 2. Fruit on.